Today we're going to finish up Chapter 5, talking about bringing it all together, all the different elements of design, the space, the lines and shapes and images and color and typography and balance and all these different things. There's a lot of stuff to think about. And so this week I'm going to give you some more strategies to help you lay out the page and create series of layouts that all kind of are unified together. So I'm going to give you a couple more strategies for that. Let's see. Last week we introduced the grid. That might be sort of a new concept for a lot of you. Some of you might have heard of it before. We kind of talked about how the grid it's just an underlying structure that is pretty much found in. I tend to think it's found in everything, whether it's on purpose or not. Even the most kind of jumbled up mess tends to have some sort of order beneath it. Now, that can be argued, I'm sure, but that's just my own personal view. There are other ways to lay out a page or a piece of design, whatever it may be. The grid is probably the most commonly used, and it's a great starting point, especially just starting out, and you might choose to break it down the line, maybe with that same design as you're going. You might say, why don't I just move this around and get rid of the grid? But it's a good place to help you start, to kind of give you an order and a structure and a hierarchy, and then you can rip it apart later. The chapter talks about intuitive arrangement and integrating type and image. And I'm going to kind of talk about both of these. Intuitive arrangement is, I think, what a lot of people do when they start out, but to do it well takes a lot of practice and kind of knowledge of all these different elements. And that's basically just taking, without any preconceived ideas, you basically just take the elements that you want to use and you start putting them on the page, and you arrange them and rearrange them, and it's pretty labor intensive to do it well. But you kind of look at the way the different elements relate to each other and how one affects the other one, and you move stuff around again. Sort of a collage kind of scrapbooking kind of way of doing design. It's not very. It's not the best way to do it if you have deadlines and all that kind of stuff, because it does take a lot longer to get a unified result. I mean, you could just slap a bunch of crap together, but that's not really what we're trying to do here. So, intuitive arrangement is just looking at all these things, not necessarily at their, how they relate to the page, but how they relate to the different elements together. And I guess that does sort of, extend to, the space that they're in. It gives you a few examples, kind of a crappy example. On 218, just all these letters are kind of thrown together, and it's hard to see what the hell they're trying to tell you. So I don't know if that's a really good example. Integrating type and image is another way that you can do this. I'll get to that in just a minute, actually. It talks about deconstructing the grid on 220 and 221. And this is kind of what I was hoping for a couple weeks ago when we did the different layouts on a page, where I gave you a Word document. And you're supposed to lay it out in 5 different ways. I think that was the typography chapter. If you look in the top right corner, page 221, there's kind of an example of what I was talking about. There's 2 layouts with the same copy. The one on the left is very straightforward. It's 3 columns, a small image at the bottom of the middle column, and it looks like 1 caption and 1 kind of introductory paragraph that's larger. And that's kind of boring. That's kind of what you would see in a crappy magazine somewhere. The one on the right has the same exact pieces of information, but it's just much more dynamic layout when you look at it. It's got the introductory paragraph going up the side. It's got the image kind of lighter behind the text, and the columns of text actually kind of interlock. And it's just a much more dynamic, interesting layout. It might not be as easy to read or to understand, but people have kind of developed in that sense, because we're always bombarded with so much information that it's kind of, we've become more clever at deciphering all the information thrown at us, so we can kind of it almost becomes sort of a game, sort of an interplay of, you lay it out and I'll solve it, But in some cases that might not work. In some cases it would. If it's a straightforward, if you're just trying to get information out, you want to do it as easily as possible so that most people will understand it. So that's an idea if you're stuck. If you have something laid out in a grid format and it's kind of boring, take those elements and shake them up. Move them around, play with them, see what you can get. Kind of going along with intuitive arrangement, like I talked about, is integrating type and image. And that's another kind of strategy that you can use when you're doing a layout. This works better when you're doing a one-off piece, like just, one poster or one advertisement. When you get in a series, it becomes a lot more labor-intensive to follow this strategy for multiple pieces, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But integrating type and image it's a kind of a neat way where you look. It's sort of like intuitive, where you look at what you have, you look at the image, and you look at the copy that you have, and how can they complement each other? Because that's, we've talked about that before. An image should complement the type, the text, and vice versa. The text should complement the image. And if they don't, then there might be something wrong. Maybe it's better off if it's just text or just an image. If you do it right, I think a lot of times the two can create a better whole, if you combine them. But you have to be conscious of that, how these things kind of affect each other. So integrating type and image would be, maybe if you look at it's a picture of a waterfall or something like that, and so your text, your columns of text, kind of follow that waterfall down to kind of give this falling water kind of effect. There's an example on 224. It's 4 squares. It's a calendar, which is kind of a weird calendar. I don't really know that would help you a whole lot if you're trying to look at dates. But it's more of a graphic design kind of thing, just an exhibition. And they've kind of, spring, they've used the typography to sort of give the effect of grass growing. Summer, it looks like maybe rain falling down with the typography. Fall, leaves blowing, and winter, it kind of looks like ice, or maybe ice crystals, snow, something like that. Another one of integrating type and image right next to that, it's this big pink spread. And a bunch of copy, but if you look at it, obviously it's a cross, so that's pretty easy to decipher, what that's about without it. It's in a different language. I don't know what it says, but I'm guessing it's something to do with Christianity. So that's a really useful way to kind of double up on your meaning that people get from whatever you're working on. If you can find find clever ways to kind of create this double message where this is what it's about when you get into it, but then there's something that catches you right off the bat that gets them interested. I don't know if that makes sense. Let's see, what's another example of that? If you're looking at, whatever the image may be, maybe the type kind of plays along with those elements in the image. If there's a dark spot, maybe that's where you have reversed out white text. Or if there's a lot of lines, horizontal lines, like on 227, there's a picture of kind of like a, from a mountaintop looking over kind of like a cloudy horizon. And of course, that would look kind of, well, actually, because the text is kind of mimicking that horizon line. And what I was going to say is that would look kind of weird if you had the text, vertically against that. But, now that you think about it, that creates a contrast. So it depends on what you're going for. If you were looking at that horizon line and all the text was vertical going like that, it would definitely create more tension, more of a contrast for the viewer. And if that's what you're going for, good. This looks like it's more of a, I don't know, classical music or something. I don't I'm not really sure. A lot of this is not in English. So maybe they don't want that tension or that contrast. They want it to be kind of calm and seductive or whatever. Another example on 227, there's a photo of a guy on one side of a spread and a bunch of words kind of overlapped each other on the other side. And they kind of they move into that space of that image. And that's kind of integrating them. That's a neat idea. I've done that before, where you have a picture of somebody. Maybe this is somebody who stands for a lot of different things. If it's the Dalai Lama, maybe peace and wisdom and knowledge and all these things, and maybe the easiest way to get